You count on Native America Calling for timely and entertaining conversations every day. Now, Native America Calling is counting on you. We are ending the year with a fundraising drive to keep the conversations going. And when you make a donation of any amount between now and the end of the drive, December 31st, you'll be entered to win 2 Alaska Airlines tickets as our thank you for supporting Native America Calling. Go to nativeamericacalling.com and click on the button that says Donate Today. Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. A bill just signed by President Donald Trump gives formal control of the land where the Wounded Knee Massacre took place to the Oglala and Cheyenne River Sioux tribes. The bill offers greater protections for the site on into the future. The law comes after the Trump administration also reaffirmed the Medals of Honor for the U.S. soldiers who took part in the massacre 135 years ago today. We'll revisit the history of Wounded Knee, as well as the remembrance of the 38 Dakota men hanged in Mankato, Minnesota. That's coming up after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Arizona tribal reservations were home to 2 of the nation's 10 internment camps during World War II. On the western edge of the state, the Colorado River Indian Tribes welcomes visitors to see abandoned relics from that dark past. In fact, there's an annual pilgrimage, and this year, KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrazio went along.
And one way to remember is by rebuilding, with CRIT entrusting the care of crumbling buildings to the nonprofit behind the pilgrimage.
It's not Post and Community Alliance. It's not anybody that we work for. The building is our client.
Barbara Darden is a preservation architect from Aurora, Colorado. She's been restoring Poston piece by piece since 2009, turning that camp into a construction zone, this time along with Andrew Phillips, owner of a Durango, Colorado company called Natural Dwelling.
The same mud, the same walls, same exact material being reworked a second time around.
On this October Saturday, camp survivors and descendants are repairing a classroom wall, internees made from adobe clay and mud.
My first guess is they were able to find these little pockets of windblown clay in the foothills here. They used the few scant resources they had, made great brick, and their workmanship and their mix design and how they laid it and stacked it and built it is all top drawer.
For the restoration, new slabs were hauled out from a Phoenix brickyard to replace that broken wall. But the old material isn't going to waste. It's being blended into new mortar that'll fill in the cracks, much like one the U.S. Army gifted to internees over 8 decades ago. Hard work also being done by CRIT member Adrian Antone Jr. to restore vandalized structures.
I thought it was pretty disrespectful, and so finally giving my part to help out, especially build this little wall.
Darden dreamt of rebuilding a lot more.
We would love to restore everything.
But that comes with a big price tag defrayed by National Park Service grants to preserve internment sites like this one. Now the Trump administration is eradicating signs marking the camps and other so-called disparaging reminders of the country's history.
We do not anticipate any more grants. Being more realistic, we're looking at maybe 4 buildings here, and then the others we'll just have to let them go and watch them fall into ruin.
Either way, CRIT will keep working to protect this history, one brick at a time. For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrazio reporting from Poston.
President Trump signed a bill into law Friday that will give Alaska Native veterans more time to file for their Native allotments. The deadline to apply was Monday, but legislation passed earlier this month to give veterans a 5-year extension. The Native Allotment Program was created more than 100 years ago to put more federal land into private ownership. It allowed individual Alaska Natives to claim 160 acres, but when the federal program ended in 1971, Vietnam vets missed out because many were overseas fighting the war. As of mid-December, only about 25% of eligible veterans had applied for their allotments. Many said the process was too difficult to navigate. Senator Dan Sullivan, one of the main sponsors of the bill, said he will make staff available to assist veterans with their applications. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com. Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Today, tribal leaders from Oglala, Cheyenne River, Rosebud, and Standing Rock Sioux tribes are gathering for a solemn remembrance on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. It's the site where more than 300 men, women, and children from these tribes were killed in the Wounded Knee Massacre. A new law adds protections for part of the land. That law comes alongside Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's refusal to rescind the Medals of Honor awarded the soldiers who took part in the massacre. He called the actions by the soldiers brave and declared their place in history is settled. We'll look back at the Wounded Knee Massacre that took place on this day 135 years ago. Also, we'll hear from an organizer of an annual run that remembers the largest mass execution in U.S. history. Listeners, you can join us today with your comments or questions. Just call us at 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now on Zoom from Laramie, Wyoming is Jeff Means. He is an associate professor of history and department chair at the University of Wyoming and an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. Jeff, good morning and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Joining us from Fort Yates, North Dakota is Courtney Yellowfat. He is a historian and chief cultural consultant and co-producer with the Densmore Lakota Songs Repatriation Project. He is Hunk Papa Lakota and a descendant of people who were present at the Wounded Knee Massacre. Courtney, hello and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Oh, good morning, and it's nice to be back.
It's great to have both of you on the show. Jeff, I want to begin with you. This new law gives the Oglala and Cheyenne River Sioux tribes greater protection of the Wounded Knee Massacre site. It also bars any commercial activity on the land. Tell us more about the significance of these actions.
Well, it's significant in that sense that there's added protections, but it doesn't really provide any funding for creating a memorial or any kind of a physical structure to help people better understand what happened there. And quite frankly, the reservation land was already guaranteed. So while it's a tremendous step toward reconciliation, I don't think fundamentally it's going to change what's going on at Wounded Knee.
What do you think the motivation was then for this decision? I mean, if there's no money behind it, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of resource effort to make more education or make more of an effort to make people familiar with this. Why do it? Why now?
Well, I think that it does offer a movement toward really good relations. between the U.S. government and Lakota. It gives everybody a chance to move in a good, positive direction, and I think it's significant for Lakota leadership to get this done, especially in today's political climate. So it is important. It would have just been, I think, more powerful if there was some educational component to it as well.
All right, understood. Now, many historians over the years have written about the Wounded Knee Massacre. How would you like to see this history framed today here in 2025? And have you taken issue with any past historical descriptions of the massacre?
Well, yeah, in the past, Wounded Knee was always seen as the end of Native American culture. Books were written by former historians that called this the last days of the Sioux Nation, and almost universally, this will be seen as the end of Indian history. And obviously, that's not the case. We are still here, and we will be here for a long time to go. So that kind of representation, I think, comes from basically in 1890, the Native Americans in general became less interesting to the American public as these kind of protagonists or antagonists, depending on your point of view, for American expansion, and kind of faded into the background of American society, except through popular media, dime novels, film, things like that.
So it sounds like you're more today concerned with making it known that this wasn't the end. This was not the end of Native culture or of Lakota or these other tribes, their relevance, their stories.
No, exactly. Because not only was it not the end, the significance placed upon it within Native culture, I see as kind of an appropriation of grief from the Lakota. It's the United States is pointing to this massacre and kind of using it as an example of, oh, okay, things got bad, but things are okay since then, and they're really not. Relations didn't change for the better after 1890. They got precipitously worse, and so I'd like people to understand that while this is a tremendously important historical event to note and remember, it's also not even possibly the most important thing that happened at Pine Ridge in the previous years, because the General Allotment Act in 1889 probably had more long-lasting effect on the Lakota than Wounded Knee the following year. So putting it within the Native perspective, I think, would be really important, and that's something the U.S. simply hasn't really kind of been able to accomplish.
And to review more of this history of the massacre itself, what was the U.S. Army there to do on that day, and what was the relationship at that point between tribes of the Dakotas and the U.S. government? What was it?
Well, it was kind of a mixed bag, really, but the Army was there because politically at that time, the Republican Party was pretty much still in control, and they wanted to bring in these Western states as Republican states as well, and sending the Army out there and having them purchase goods from local merchants and having them help the economy was seen as a positive effect. And plus, obviously the fervor over the ghost dance was reaching its peak right about this time. And so, the Army's there to, I think it's just a show of force. There was really no violence expected. And of course, obviously it did, because the 7th Cavalry, I think, was probably a little anxious to get revenge for greasy grass.
And who fired the first shot, and is there any understanding as to what motivated that?
Yeah. Well, Spotted Elk and his people were met on the 28th by Major Whitside, and later Colonel Forsyth came in, and they surrounded this encampment of 350 people, and for no real reason other than that they had left Standing Rock without express permission, even though they had a standing offer to come down and visit by the Oglala. And once that camp was surrounded and under control, the Army went in to disarm the Lakota. And once they went in to disarm the Lakota, of course, this is going to cause some consternation, some unhappiness among the Lakota, especially because guns were not easy to come by and they were expensive. And one of the Lakota, Black Coyote, was deaf. And when they went to take his brand new Winchester rifle from him, he resisted and he couldn't understand or hear any orders. So there was a scuffle and his weapon went off first, but it wasn't pointed at anyone. It just went off. And then there's some debate about exactly what happened after that. But generally, once that shot was fired, U.S. soldiers started firing. The Lakota started rushing for their weapons that had already been taken from them. And that really just started the melee right there.
We have Jeff Means kicking off our conversation here today on Native America Calling. He's an associate professor of history and the department chair at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. He's also an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. We have the phone lines open for listeners who would like to join this conversation. We already have one caller on the line. We'll take this call when we come back from this next break. But for other listeners who would like to join us as well, share your thoughts with regard to the Wounded Knee Massacre. What are your thoughts? What are your insights? Maybe you have a connection through your tribe to the Wounded Knee Massacre. We'd love to hear from you today. And the number to call, 1-800-996-2848. Again, 1-800-996-2848. You can call that number. We have producers standing by, and we're waiting for your call. So we always enjoy when listeners join the conversation, especially folks who are familiar with these topics or maybe have personal experience or a family connection or a tribal history connected to what we're talking about on the show. And we got a lot of stations up in the Dakotas, so I know we've got listeners here who can talk about the Wounded Knee Massacre as well. Join our guest today. Share your insights. The number again, 1-800-996-2848. Of course, we also have our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. Those are all available for you to post, like, comment. Also, you can go to our website, nativeamericacalling.com, and you can post a comment there as well. So, short break, and we'll be right back. We're going to take a caller, and we'll continue our conversation with our guests. Stay with us.
Amy Bowers Cortales witnessed one of the country's biggest fish kills on the Klamath River in Oregon more than 2 decades ago. That propelled her life of conservation and activism that helped bring about the destruction of that river's dams. We'll hear from her and the story of the return of buffalo to the Blackfeet Reservation on the menu on the next Native America Calling.
Repatriation is the return of ancestors and stolen culture. The Association on American Indian Affairs is hosting the 11th annual Repatriation Conference, Feeding the Fire, Advancing the Movement, in February 2026. This fully virtual conference will offer small group interactive workshops, strategies, networking, and more to advance domestic and international repatriation. More at indian-affairs.org. The association supports this show.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. We are speaking with Lakota historians about the Wounded Knee Massacre and efforts to memorialize the site of the massacre. Join us with comments or questions. 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We've already got a couple of callers on the line. First up is Lynette, who is listening on Keeley Radio in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Good morning, Lynette. You are on the air.
Good morning. I couldn't attend the Wounded Knee that's going on today. I'm a survivor. My relatives come from all over. They come from Standing Rock, Eagle Butte, Rosebud, Oglala. My family is Sichunku, but I reside in Oglala. My family, they relocated there from when that happened. My grandpa and his mom and his brother, they ran, and then they went to White River, and then from there they ended up in the northern part of the Rosebud tribe, that area, and by White River, and I think Lower Cutmeat. And I've attended a bit of these meetings that were happening that led to the event that's happening today. But what I would like to say is I would like everybody to put the political area and everything aside and think of our survivors, because some of our survivors, we still live our old Lakota ways, and some of us couldn't attend today. And also just think of the survivors and pray for the survivors. And thank you for everybody that showed up today. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Really appreciate you calling in. That is a beautiful message that you share, Lynette. Also, some amazing family history that Lynette shares with our listeners as well. Calling in from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, listening on Keeley Radio. Let's go to another caller in South Dakota. This is Nathaniel, who is listening on KIPI in Cheyenne River. Hello, Nathaniel.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. First thing, I want to shout out the runners that started today. My Alexia Joe Brinks pony is among them. And I also wanted to say that I can appreciate the bill that has passed, but if those in power really want to do something meaningful, they need to correct it to include Standing Rock, and they should rescind the medals. I don't think it'll happen soon, but I'm hopeful that I'll see it in my lifetime. Thank you.
The medals, right, Nathaniel? You got to mention those medals. And I want to bring Courtney Yellowfat into the conversation, but first I want to go to Jeff Means quickly. And Jeff, the medals. Again, Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, would not revoke those medals of honor that were awarded to the soldiers who took part in the massacre. He called it a battle, didn't even refer to it as a massacre. What message does that action send?
Well, it sends a clear message that the United States is not going to take responsibility for what happened. It also diminishes the horror of what happened. I mean, these people were given medals for taking Hotchkiss guns and firing them up the canyon where they knew women and children were trying to take shelter. And that was seen as a brave act. Things like that happened time and time again. And it's really just kind of a horrible message to send to all Native Americans about this. But it's a very political thing to do because the United States has always been very reticent to admit any wrongdoing in anything. And this is one of the most egregious things that the United States has done. And of course, by saying that, he's appeasing I think the people that are mostly going to be voting for his political party.
Thank you, Jeff. Courtney Yellowfat joins us now from Fort Yates, North Dakota. He is a historian, chief cultural consultant, and co-producer with the Densmore Lakota Songs Repatriation Project. And Courtney, 135 years, since the massacre. How do you and other members of the Standing Rock community view this history?
Well, what we have to remember is this history, the catalyst that started what ultimately happened in Wounded Knee in 1890 was the death of Sitting Bull 15 days before. And I think one of the callers are there, Nathaniel, said it right. We're Standing Rock involved in this. You have Pine Ridge, Oglala, you have Cheyenne River, but nowhere mentioned is Standing Rock. And although this whole thing is presented as an act of respect, I think it's really just lip service from the federal government. It is ultimately another attempt to control what should rightfully remain under the sovereign authority of the Lakota tribes. Wounded Knee doesn't need another symbolic gesture from Congress. It needs truth and justice and full recognition of our inherent rights as Lakota people. So, yeah, like Wounded Knee is simply just not land. It is the resting place of our relatives, our women, our children. And, I'm finding out a lot of history. But, what I want to hit on, too, is even more troubling is, like you brought up before, is the continued refusal to rescind the Medals of Honor. Well, there's no honor in the slaughter of unarmed Lakota women, children, and elders. There should be none. But what ultimately happens is that, especially with this administration, they're trying to whitewash history. But I want to go back to when I was in American history class in high school, and I say this sarcastically because I read 20 lines about the Wounded Knee Massacre, the Battle of Wounded Knee. That's what it was called back when I was taking high school American history, and we were honored, sarcastically saying one whole paragraph in American history, But we have to remember that I think if Congress truly wants to honor what happened at Wounded Knee, it needs to, the real issues in Lakota country are, uphold treaties, restoring lands taken through coercion, through theft, investing in housing, education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, respecting tribal sovereignty by engaging tribes before, not after, decisions are made. Real quick too, what happened at Wounded Knee, I think Professor Means said it right, is that they thought they were going to extinguish us. It wasn't a battle, it was a silencing. But what they did was they left what was once a great fire of my people. What they ultimately did was try to extinguish this. But we never went away. What happened was they left their mistake was leaving one little ember burning of my people. And there was life breathed into it over generations by these old grandmothers, grandfathers that kept our songs, kept our traditions, kept our language underground. And they fanned the flames, which is now burning. And what their mistake was, the government, was that they taught us their ways. So, the blood spill there did not end us. It planted seeds of a new resistance. Mm-hmm. And that resistance is just built into generations now. Well, we're not battling them on a frozen tundra or a prairie or in woodlands. We're battling them in court. We're battling them in legislation. We're battling them in the hearts and minds of like-minded people. And that's what they did. They really planted seeds of resistance.
Courtney, seeds of resistance. I think a lot of listeners right now are listening to your words and thinking, yep, that's it. That's what it's all about. Now, the ghost dance was mentioned earlier. Tell us more about the importance of the ghost dance and what was it about the ghost dance that settlers and the federal government feared so much?
Well, the ghost dance, it was brought to our people from a Paiute holy man named Ovoka. And he had convinced the people that they can speak to their relatives, the ones that have passed, and the buffalo would return, And Sitting Bull, from our understanding, our history, he didn't participate in the ghost dance, but he allowed it to happen because he wanted to give some sort of hope to his people, something he wanted to give to his people. And what happened was the Indian agents were so afraid of this ghost dance, of another Indian uprising happening, that they quickly sent Indian policemen to arrest Sitting Bull on December 15th, which ended up with the death of Sitting Bull at that time. and the people of Sitting Bull's camp going down to Spotted Elk, or some people know him as Bigfoot, and seeking shelter and safety and food amongst Red Cloud's people. That's why they made that journey in the harshest environment possible to get down to safety. And when they got there, they weren't met with food and shelter. They were met with bullets and death.
Mm-hmm. Courtney, what do you usually do on this day, December 29th, just personally or your family?
It's a day to remember. We remember that Wounded Knee lives in our memory, not only as a place of sorrow, but as a reminder of survival. Like I said, the blood spilled there didn't end us. That prayer is still continuing on through generations, and it's a testament in our languages, our ceremonies, our songs, or the way we speak to our Creator. We as a family, and we remember so that the truth is not buried beneath medals or rewritten in histories. We remember because healing cannot begin without honesty. And we remember because those who fell at Wounded Knee still walk with us in spirit and in their stories. So, it's a day to remember what happened and be truthful about it.
How often are you able to get down to the Wounded Knee Memorial and see it, visit?
It's been a couple years, but I remember as a young man, my father, my brother were on the Wounded Knee Memorial ride. I was too young to go, so I stayed home and protected my mother and my sisters here at home. But they talk about that time very honorably. It was a tough time, but the people that traveled from Sitting Bull's camp to Wounded Knee at that time, their spirits definitely rolled with them down there. And so those spirits are still highly, we have ways to communicate with them, and we just remember so that their stories are never buried anymore.
All right. And Courtney, going back to the murder of Sitting Bull, now obviously this escalated tensions. Tell us a little bit more about Sitting Bull, his leadership, and just how important a figure he was to his people during this time, and how his murder, I mean, again, it just, the way these events just all escalated, it's just really fascinating, tragic, but so fascinating from a historical perspective.
Talk about Sitting Bull? Sitting Bull was we have to remember too that Sitting Bull was the last chief of the Lakota tribe that was ever selected by the Lakota people. A lot of chiefs came after, but they were kind of appointed leaders of a family group or a band. He was the last one that was not elected. I don't want to say elected, but he was the last one that was appointed by the people to lead the people. And he was, I think there was ultimately still a fear of what he was about. You know what I mean? There was a fear that he would get the people to rise up again. So there was also always time to, they tried to extinguish him by just putting him someplace, just telling him to live out his life. But that didn't happen. He wasn't that type of person, I want to say. But he always had what was in his mind and his heart for his people. He did not fight out of hate. He fought for the love of his people. And that's what people don't get, is that there was no big agenda like we see nowadays when they're attacking Nigeria or they're attacking boats along the Caribbean. Our people fought to protect their way. They fought to protect the women and children only. There was no huge agenda to move forward.
Thank you, Courtney. Jeff Means, how about you? To what degree do you think Sitting Bull's murder escalated tensions that led to the Wounded Knee Massacre?
Oh, it was the key match that started the whole fire. The ghost dance. The reason the white sod is so threatening is because part of it promised that all white people would go away. And to them, they saw that as violent, when actually it doesn't mean anything violent, just they'll go away. That coupled with Agent Royer down at Pine Ridge he was just a horrible Indian agent. They called him young man afraid of his Indians. He was just a panic-stricken political appointee who made contributions to President Harrison's campaign, and so he got this job. And he kept calling. He was so afraid that he kept calling for U.S. military aid, saying that everybody around Pine Ridge and near it were all going to be slaughtered, and so on. And this is why the military was sent there, was to see what's going on. And with the murder of Sitting Bull, I mean, that was going to cause problems no matter what. And rightfully, I think Spotted Elk left Standing Rock because he thought it was a good time to get out of town. There was a lot of trouble there because Indian police had been killed as well, not just Sitting Bull. So,
all right, we have to take a short break. We'll come back and continue this conversation.
Sorry.
Skugtash. For more than 40 years, Ramona Farms has revived ancient traditional foods, tepary beans, pinoli, polentas, and more, all from store.ramonafarms.com. Ramona Farms supports this show.
Kaufman & Associates is a Native-owned and led consulting firm supporting Native communities with culturally grounded solutions to shape Indigenous futures. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
We're glad you're listening today to Native America Calling. We're getting perspectives on the Wounded Knee Massacre. It occurred 135 years ago today. We're also going to remember another solemn historical event from this time of year, the execution of Dakota men on December 26, 1862 in Mankato, Minnesota. Listeners, you can join us. Share your comments and questions about the Dakota 38 or the U.S. Dakota War of 1862 by calling 1-800-996-2848. That number again, 1-800-996-2848. One of our guests today, Jeff Means, is an associate professor of history at the University of Wyoming. And Jeff, before break, you were giving us some of the history there with regard to Sitting Bull's murder and how it ultimately led to the massacre at Wounded Knee and just some of these other related historical events. Go ahead and finish what you were telling us. It was really interesting.
Oh, to tell you the truth, I kind of lost my train of thought. But when Spotted Elk went down to Pine Ridge, it's just what Mr. Yellowfat was saying. I mean, he was looking for safety and help, and instead, they send the army after this supposed renegade group that had left Standing Rock without permission. And when they posed no threat at all, and there was no violence aimed at U.S. citizens at all in any of this. And what happened was just a horrible massacre that was kicked off by James McLaughlin, the agent up at Standing Rock, seeing the ghost dance as an excuse to get rid of Sitting Bull, because Sitting Bull was a traditionalist that wanted the Lakota to maintain their culture, and he was a thorn in the side of this McLaughlin, and so he used this as an excuse to arrest him, and instead he got murdered.
Jeff, what about the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868? It was another key event that led up to the massacre. Can you give us a little bit of that historical context?
Yeah, the Treaty of 1868 is really the foundational document between the Lakota and the United States. It promised the Lakota a massive amount of territory, basically all of South Dakota, parts of North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Nebraska, and said that no land could be taken unless it was approved by 3/4 of the adult males of the Lakota Nation. And we put that in there specifically because we knew how duplicitous the United States was when dealing with Native nations and how they could get land away from them. And every bit of land that was taken from us since then, it was in violation of the Treaty of 1868, which the U.S. Supreme Court agreed in 1980 and said, yes, we did steal your land. It doesn't really, again, another kind of empty gesture because they want to pay us for it, not give it back. And I think what Mr. Yelfat was talking about with the, empty gestures, we just don't need any more of those. We need real concrete kinds of understanding between nations. And while this House Bill 165 is a positive, it's not really going to change anything, and that's what we need. So that Treaty of 1868 was supposed to be the home of the Lakota forever, and instead, eventually, we're going to end up on these smaller reservations scattered throughout the region.
Jeff Means and Courtney Yellowfat joining us here today on Native America Calling. We're going to pivot here and bring in another guest, but I want to let listeners know you can still join this conversation. Give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. Share your thoughts on the Wounded Knee Massacre or also the execution of Dakota men on December 26, 1862, the Dakota 38. And to talk more about that, we have Willard Mailbear Jr. on the line. He joins us from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He is the current organizer of the Dakota 38+2 Memorial Run. He's also a citizen of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. Willard, hello, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Hi, Mitakiapi. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking, Willard. Now, the Dakota 38 Memorial Run, it is approaching its 40th anniversary. Tell us more about your father, who was the original organizer of the event, and what motivated him to start this run.
Yeah, my father, Willard Mailbear Sr., had a vision about 40 years ago. And, during that time, he was living in Minneapolis, and he was doing a lot of ceremony with like the Owens family and a lot of the Dakota community out here in Minneapolis. And this vision, he had seen a couple times, and he had confided and, talked this dream over with Art and Amos Owen. And, together they, had kind of realized the vision into a memorial run. And, it was that following winter when the first annual Dakota 38 run took place. And it was, sort of an accumulation of a bunch of people in community, both, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Lakota, that, plotted the course of the run and kind of made it come into fruition.
Now, in addition to the run, there is an annual memorial horse ride, and we've talked about that as well on previous episodes of Native America Calling. What do these two events together accomplish?
I think it just brings light to a lot of the injustices that happen. I think like, when, especially in Mankato, when both of our, the ride and the run kind of come together, and the community there really like sees it like in person that, this thing happened, even though there's like a monument there in Reconciliation Park. I think like the ceremonial act of doing these things to honor, the sacrifices that were made really kind of like opened people's eyes up to see like, oh, this is still a thing. Like, this isn't just like something lost in a chapter of the history books. Like, this is something that people are still feeling. And, I think it brings a lot of light to, a lot of things that kind of, evaporated into history, and, brings a lot of like the younger generations into like realizing a lot of, something that they may not think of when they're celebrating Christmas, you know what I mean? Or just, so I think like, continuing to do these kinds of ceremonies and these memorials just keeps it alive and, keeps the narrative going.
And Willard, going back to that day, December 26, 1862, what do you want people to remember most? And give us some history.
Yeah, for me, I feel like just, reminding a lot of this generation, like, the Dakota people were exiled, all of the broken promises, the rushed trials, if any trial at all. And, just that there was our ancestors that had given this ultimate sacrifice of their life. And, I oftentimes I opened up the speech, at because we have a ceremony at Fort Snelling at midnight. And I always try to open up that speech of like, hey, I'm not a historian, but I am, I am the organizer of this run, and I can share with you like what I know and what it means to me. And I think a lot of what it like means to me is that, we recognize the sacrifices that were made, and that we, really remember what, these relatives went through, and, like how brave they were to, give their life, and, and just like the continuation of our like people and the continuation of the fight. And, for me, at least, whenever we're doing the run, I like to just really concentrate on like what it must have been like to, march yourself, or like be marched while you're shackled, and the women walked with you and mourned for you and cried for you. And then just to be like hung just because you were Dakota. I think that, it just really brings together all of that like memory and trauma and injustice to light, at least for me. And I try to, mention that at least every time that we start the run.
Willard, what always amazes me about this history is it was President Abraham Lincoln who ordered the execution, and someone who is so revered, so celebrated in American history, and yet major blood on his hands. And this is something that you don't always hear about with regard to the legacy of Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, and I can't imagine being an American politician during any time, honestly. But it totally seems so like two steps backwards, one step forward. And, I think it just really shows that, how insignificant life was back then, I feel like, and especially like for like to be politically charged of like, oh yeah, there's this, all these Native Americans are uprising, something must be done. And I'm sure there was a lot of like political pressure and, stuff like that, where it's just kind of like, oh, what's 38 lives, to sort of satisfy all these people that, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Are pushing back against our policy, or trying to like make mockery of, like, oh, these like broken promises, like, we set the rules kind of vibe. I don't know, and I've oftentimes tried to like, I don't know. I try to give, especially people throughout history, some sort of like contextual consideration of like maybe what it was like on the other side of the, the fence. But I can't see a reality in which, I or anyone I know would be okay with just being like, yeah, let's just throw these 38 lives away because it feels like the right move to do. And then to just kind of like own that and be like, yeah, we did that. It's super sad.
Yeah, beyond the pale, for sure. Willard, you have a Dakota 38 Memorial Run Facebook page and a lot of traffic, a lot of activity on December 26th. Tell me more about some of the people who go on the run and what are their motivations? What are they thinking about? What are they praying about while they're running with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always surprising to see like just the multicultural mix of people that come to honor those 38. It's a lot of people from community. I think in the early years, I have like an old photograph of the very first run roster, and majority of the names were Native. And nowadays, I would say at least like half, maybe at least a third of the runners are, non-Native, but feel a call to come and honor those lives that were sacrificed. And, again, we all enter the run, viewing it as a ceremony. So, someone once told me like it's good to have fun, but don't make fun of it. You know what I mean? So there is like a lot of good times and camaraderie, but it's definitely ceremony. And it's powerful to see the energy that people put into this run, even if it's their first year and they just want to show up for the injustice and do their part in ceremony.
Willard, we've got a couple of minutes before we're going to have to wrap up, but I want to ask you about your own sobriety journey, and I know that it coincides the Dakota 38 Memorial Run. How does that help you? How does it help you on your journey?
Yeah. I have 8 years of sobriety. I was released from incarceration almost 6 years ago now. I really made a commitment to the Chankuluta Red Road when I was in prison. And when I was released, my dad had passed away maybe like 2 months after I got out, and I was fortunate to be there with him in the hospital as he passed away. And one of our last conscious conversations that we had was about the run, and how important it was to him. And, I made a commitment to do everything I could to participate in the run, and, to be asked and the opportunity provided to me to be the organizer just really kind of, it made sense to me. It felt so natural, and, to be able to, organize this run for the community is, it's more than just service or anything like that. It really, it fills my spiritual cup, and it kind of, it's the most important day of the year. We were just talking about that this last, couple of days ago of how, it feels like all the rest of the year and all the rest of the ceremonies are kind of second when it comes down to the day before the 26th and kind of leading up to that. And then, right when it's done, it's all right, well, we got a whole nother year until it again. And, it just kind of, it really helps, again, it's not just service work. A lot of times in 12-step program, you want to, do things for your community and do things for those in sobriety. And to be able to show up and do this stuff for the community just really solidifies my sobriety and, keeps me moving forward.
Right on, brother. Willard, thank you for coming on the show today and updating our listeners on the Dakota 38 Memorial Run.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. Wopula.
Absolutely. Wopula Thunka. And with that, we are out of time, folks. We're going to have to wrap up this conversation today. But big thanks to our three guests, Willard Mailbear Jr., Courtney Yellowfat, and Dr. Jeffrey Means. Please join us again tomorrow as we hear from a UROC attorney and conservationist who was instrumental in bringing about the largest river restoration project in U.S. history. I'm Sean Spruce. We'll talk again soon.
Who protects Indian country? Amerind does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerind helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerind is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com. Repatriation is the return of ancestors and stolen culture. The Association on American Indian Affairs is hosting the 11th annual Repatriation Conference, Feeding the Fire, Advancing the Movement, in February 2026. This fully virtual conference will offer small group interactive workshops, strategies, networking, and more to advance domestic and international repatriation. More at Indian-Affairs.org. The association supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.